I think education is the primary thing we should all be striving for, because whether we're being educated on our own mortality and what happens when we get old and get sick and potentially can't make our own decisions. So thinking about documents like durable power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, living will, pre-need guardian, even down to final arrangements. Can't tell you the number of cases I've run into where it's a blended family, 30, 40-year second marriage, husband passes away, wife just assumes like, well, I guess I'm making the funeral arrangements, only to get the very not happy call from husband's premarital son or daughter, I'm blood and you're not, and this was my dad and I'm in charge, and by the way, you're not invited to the funeral because I never liked you anyway. These are things we need to plan around and understand that two things change people: death and money.
Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Nikki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And welcome back to another episode of Death and Dying the Digital Age, where we explore your digital legacy. I'm here with Michelangelo. Now, I have been following you on TikTok. You have quite the following right now. Tell me more about, as an estate attorney, what got you engaged in this conversation and to be able to educate people on end-of-life planning.
Well, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity. So TikTok started for me simply as an educational platform. I didn't start it as a marketing campaign, but I thought that the number of people that I run into daily during my consultations that just don't understand general concepts, or even worse, have misconceptions about what documents do, what's needed, how things work, what does estate administration look like, what do Medicaid benefits look like, how expensive are nursing homes if you need those things, and how can they decimate even a really strong financial plan. I do think it reaches a lot of people. In the digital age, it's really easy if you see something that maybe, let's say, affects your parents. Your parents have retired to Florida, where I practice, and you see something that catches your eye. It's so easy to just hit the share button and send it to all of your siblings or all your other family members and go, hey, what do you think about this for mom and dad? So I think the digital component and the shareability is really good, because it allows kids and children that maybe all live across the country to connect, get educated, and then make a decision of like, hey, is this the right consultation that we should set up for mom and dad? Like, no one wants to talk about hospice and death and dying and estate administration. And the young people think they're going to live forever. And so I'll do it when I get old. And then that's always a moving target. And then when we do get old, sometimes we miss the planning opportunity. We've had the stroke. We have dementia. The people that call me every day, they're like, hey, I think I need a power of attorney for my mom. And I interview mom. And unfortunately, mom has crossed that capacity bridge 10 years ago. She doesn't know who she is, doesn't know any of her family members. And now the kids are like, hey, I think we need to take control of mom's assets. It's kind of late for that. Now we're dealing with guardianship, whole different world, and one that you want to avoid at all cost.
You know, you've mentioned several aspects of this end-of-life planning, and hopefully people are catching up to where you are today. I mean, as an estate attorney, where did you see the need for people to be educated? They're coming into you prepared to have these conversations, or off the charts, not available with the terminology needed?
So it's interesting. When I first got started 18 years ago in the practice, I grew up in Tampa. My family has been here in Tampa since 1891. We came in, I always say we were imported as cigar labor for Tampa's cigar industry. And we've always just been here. So when I started practicing, I learned early on, I didn't want to be a litigator. I don't want to wake up every day and fight with other people. I want to try to help people. And so estate planning kind of worked. And I started calling all of the kids that I went to high school with and grew up playing baseball with. They were all having families. And I was offering them my services for free because the phone wasn't ringing and I needed some experience. And I'm like, hey, no better way to get it than to help people that I already know and who already know me. It was very interesting and eye-opening that everybody I called was like, wow, that's awesome. You know, we have 2 little kids and we don't have any estate planning done. And we've been talking about it. Thank you. Let's get started. I sent them all the questionnaire. And then literally none of them responded. And I was like, uh-oh, how am I ever going to charge for this stuff if I can't give it away to people that have known me for 20 years and actually like me? The secret there was, until your light bulb moment happens, you won't even take it if someone gives it to you for free. Once your light bulb moment happens, you'll pay top dollar for top quality work. And usually that happens in two ways. Either we or a loved one have a healthcare scare that makes us have that aha moment that, like, we're not going to live forever, or we lose a loved one or someone who's in our same age bracket. And then you go, ooh, Billy's my age and he just had a heart attack and died. And now his family's scrambling. I should probably do something. Once we hit that it's time to make a move moment in life, we'll do it. I hope through education to try to get people interested in that before, because when you play that game of chicken of like, I'll do it when I get old, you're one car accident with a brain injury away, falling off your bicycle and hitting your head, having the stroke, getting dementia. Those are all things that even people with the best intentions of, I know I need to do it and I'll do it one day, they miss that opportunity. And then the chaos happens of losing all their money to the nursing home. They've worked with a financial advisor and they've put money away and they have retirement accounts. And then to just watch it all go down at $20,000 a month in the nursing home, when with some proper planning here in Florida, we can preserve 100% of your assets. Even if you have millions of dollars, none of that needs to be spent down at your nursing home, but you got to put the tools in your toolbox before the day comes. I always say you can't buy the homeowner's insurance, when your roof is on fire. And after you've had the stroke or after your dementia hits a point where you've lost legal capacity to sign legal documents, it's too late. And our planning opportunities and our planning strategies become very limited and sometimes non-existent, where now we are in that spend down mode that could have been avoided.
In my final playbook, when we talk about the three scenarios on how people are going to die, because you're speaking my language, we're all going to die. Either sudden, unexpected, or we'll get that terminal diagnosis or condition, or that long-term care plan. But either way, we need a plan in place. So based on your experience, where do you think is the number one myth that about estate planning that keeps people from taking action?
Well, I think a couple things. I think we always think we have more time and I'll do it later. I had a guy call me one time. He just turned 100. He's like, I just turned 100 last week. I think it might be time for a will. And I was like, yeah, it might be. He lived 2 more years. So he actually had some extra time, but not all of us are that fortunate. So I think people think they have more time. People think I can do it on the fly when the time comes. And, if we all had a crystal ball, it'd be great. If we knew the day we were going to die, most of us would have some fun and bounce the last check and we wouldn't have to worry about leaving anything behind. But we don't have that crystal ball. Also, I think there's an apprehension to facing mortality because no one wants to talk about it. Whether you're young, so I have a lot of clients that are just starting families, and we have that guardian for your minor child. And I have to look at 2 parents with a 6-month-old and say, hey guys, if something happens that you guys aren't around to raise, your little 6-month-old son, who in your friend or family network would you want to raise your child? And oftentimes you can just kind of see that moment of pause of like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to talk about this. I think it's important that we do talk about it, but I understand why we don't want to talk about it. So, and then you combine that with like, I always say everybody hates lawyers, and usually for a pretty good reason, is that sometimes they're intimidating. Sometimes they're jerks and they're just not people that you want to deal with. And then everybody's always worried about the expense. But what I can tell you is if you find an attorney that you do connect with and kind of gives you that warm and fuzzy on the education side, it is always, always, always cheaper in the long run to properly plan than to avoid planning and end up either in a spend down scenario on your long-term care. And it doesn't have to just be nursing home. It can be in-home care, assisted living, memory care, or skilled nursing. So there's that aspect. And then even if nothing bad happens to you, you live to be 105, die in your sleep, never need a day's worth of care, almost always it would have been cheaper to plan to avoid the probate process than to go through.
Taxation.
I do probate as part of my practice, and I'm the first to tell people I love making money. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Been a business owner since I was 19 years old. But it is always cheaper to avoid the probate process than to go through it. In Florida, minimum 6 to 12 months. I have some that have going on 4 or 5 years now. You have 7 different fees and costs here in Florida. And by the time you add them all up, it's not uncommon to lose 7 to 10% of your net worth to lawyers, courts, and judges. So unless you love lawyers, courts, and judges more than you love your friends, family, or charities, you are throwing away money on estate administration, and you're not buying the efficiency at pennies on the dollar. It's your money. And I do have some clients that are like, oh, I'll be dead then. Who cares? Let the kids deal with it. Okay. If that's the way.
That cavalier attitude has a price tag to it.
And some people don't care. And I'm the first to tell those people, listen, I'm happy you think that way, because if I'm still practicing when you die, I have about a 95% chance of picking up your probate work, and I'll be happy to charge the state of Florida 3% on your $1 million estate, and I'll make 30 grand for about 10 to 12 hours worth of work. Makes me happy, but it also makes me happy to educate people on ways to pay me a fraction of that and get a better result. So dealer's choice.
And that educational piece with My Final Playbook, that's what we're trying to do, is to educate people on the terminology, the concepts, what they need to be looking for from a risk management standpoint. Now, one of your videos on TikTok that caught my attention, which I realized I didn't know that much about, was the Ladybird deed. Mm-hmm. Now, that enhanced life estate deed. So for those that aren't realized, when we say deed, we're talking about property. And a story about what my husband and I went through is, as much as I know, when we started to revisit my estate planning, he and I realized that we had purchased our house before we were married. So our deed was tenants in common. Mm. And so we even needed to roll back and look at how we had our deed written out and how to go back and redo our deed, because now we were married and we wanted to make sure. I mean, probate is not as challenging in Pennsylvania as it might be in some of the other states, but we also wanted to take away some of those roadblocks. So let's talk deeds. Okay. How to best manage and make sure that Ladybird deeds, let's just throw that one on the table. What is a Ladybird deed and what should we know about it for our aging parents?
So currently only 5 states in the country recognize officially something called a Ladybird deed. But overall, there's 29 states in the country that recognize some sort of a beneficiary's deed. So when you really boil down the Ladybird, enhanced life estate, transfer on death deed, beneficiary's deed, any of those things in this kind of category, what it does is allows you to effectively put a beneficiary on real estate. It could be your home. It could be a vacation house. It could be vacant property. It could be anything. If you own real property, real estate, and it's in your name or you and a spouse, then on the final owner to die, there is usually probate, which is the court-initiated process to change ownership from you to whoever it's going to go to. Now, if you don't have a will, that's called dying intestate. And then every state has its own set of rules on where does it go if you haven't named where it's supposed to go. If you do have a will, then typically your will be honored. If you have a trust, that's often better for many people because the trust avoids the probate process, gets your stuff to your beneficiaries without getting picked over by the legal system, and much faster. Because when it comes to real estate, if you have a mortgage on the house, well, the bank doesn't really care that you died. They want their monthly mortgage payment or they're going to foreclose. Homeowners associations, they don't care. They want their money. Taxes, insurance, utilities, all of those we call carrying costs just keep going the day after you die as if the day before you died. So if it's going to take 6 to 12 months in your state to get it through the court process known as probate, who's paying all of those fees and costs? And quite often, for families that are not independently wealthy, the kids don't have money. They're trying to struggle to pay their own mortgage payment. They can't cover mom and dad's mortgage, taxes, maintenance, insurance, HOA, utilities. That's thousands and thousands of dollars a month for 6 to 12 months. There's people that don't
And I
have.
just want to pause here. I just want to highlight what you're saying is that those children, those beneficiaries are not going to get access to those bank accounts if they were not designated as beneficiaries, because the estate is going through probate. And so while in probate, everything is kind of like on a standstill,
Correct.
as you're saying, but the reoccurring charges continue.
Yep. So a lot
And
of times
somebody's going to have to pay that
properties get foreclosed on during
during
probate.
probate.
They get sold on the courthouse steps on a foreclosure sale at pennies on the dollar, and then the families get a lot less. So you mentioned beneficiaries. I like beneficiaries. I don't like them as much as trusts, but the idea is creating efficiency on getting your stuff to where it's supposed to go when you pass away. And historically, it's been pretty easy. You can go down to your bank and tell them, hey, on my checking account, when I die, I want it to go to my kids or my siblings or my charity or whatever. And it's called a POD or TOD at local banks, pay on death or transfer on death. And as long as that beneficiary survives you, is healthy, not in the middle of getting divorced or sued, doesn't have a drug problem, those beneficiary designations work just fine. But you can't just call the county and say, hey, when I die, I want to leave my house to my son. Like they're going to say, like, well, don't ask us. Call a lawyer or do a deed or do a trust. So in those 29 states that offer some sort of a Ladybird style deed, and again, to be clear, all that a Ladybird deed does, or transfer on death deed, it allows you to name one or more beneficiaries on real estate, just like you name beneficiaries on a life insurance policy. You buy life insurance, not for yourself typically, but for those you leave behind. So when you buy the life insurance policy or when you set up your 401k at work, it's who do you want this money to go to when you die if there's anything left? Well, the Ladybird deed does that for real estate and allows you to transfer outside of the court process known as probate to your beneficiaries. Again, for some people, maybe the majority, a Ladybird into a trust gives you the best of both worlds, because the trust will say, equally to my 3 children. But if one of them were to predecease me, leaving their children, my grandchildren, then their 1/3 could go down the bloodlines to the grandchildren. And then if the grandchildren are minors, well, they can't own real estate. So now the trust has extra language called a contingent minors trust that says if any of my beneficiaries are under age 18, or we can even go like 25, they don't get their inheritance outright, but it's held by someone who I trust to manage it for them until they get mature and responsible enough to handle it. So for a lot of folks, I like the trust better, but there are a lot of people in this country that are, fixed income retirees. They're living check to check on Social Security. They've spent 30 years paying off their house. So that's their one big nugget of assets, of valuation in their estate. And then they maybe have, a life insurance policy. Maybe they have a checking and a savings and maybe a little 401k or IRA. Well, if you have a really simple estate like that, it might make a lot of sense to save the money on the full-blown trust package.
Because it's thousands of dollars to set up
exactly.
a trust.
Do a life estate, enhanced life estate, Ladybird, transfer on death deed on the house, and then call your bank, call your IRA company, and check with your life insurance company. Make sure you have all those beneficiaries coordinated. And God forbid, if anything happens to one of those beneficiaries, it is on you to call and restructure all those beneficiaries if life throws one of those curveballs. And it sometimes doesn't even need to be the death of a beneficiary. It could be one of your beneficiaries becoming disabled and now becoming on public benefits or a special needs individual. Many, if not most, public assistance programs are what's called means tested. So they look at that applicant's access to income and assets. So I have a lot of people that are on Medicaid, on public housing, and their parent dies and leaves them, 10 grand, not a ton of money, but enough to now disrupt all their public benefits. So that's where we get into, if you have a special needs person or someone on public benefits, we can add language to your estate plan that allows them to benefit from their inheritance, but not throw them off of the benefits they're already getting. Because if you think about it, if all your inheritance is doing for your beneficiary is just displacing the public benefits for some short period of time, you haven't really moved the needle on their quality of life. All you've done is let the government take a break on paying benefits until they burn down their inheritance, and then the government kicks back in. It's the same thing. You might as well have left it to somebody else. But if you really want to make their lives better, We want to do it in a supplemental or supplementary way that allows them to actually enjoy some of what you're leaving them without just displacing what they already had.
So we keep using the word deed, Ladybird deed. Do you know where that, it's like a funny name.
So there's
Do you know where it came from?
There's two schools of thought on how it happened, both of which originate in South Florida in the Broward County, kind of Fort Lauderdale area. The first explanation, that may or may not be true, is that this deed was created for Ladybird Johnson, who wanted to leave real estate to individuals without it going through the estate administration process. So some attorney in South Florida created this deed for Ladybird Johnson.
LBJ's wife.
There you go. The other, which I think may be more accurate description of how it got its name, is that some attorney in South Florida created this as a way of providing a beneficiary on real estate. And in the training materials to explain how it works to other attorneys that would start using this product, they used the fictitious character of Ladybird Johnson, and she was the client in that case as a hypothetical. So one of the two, but oddly enough, they both originate in South Florida. You get to pick which story you like best, but people don't forget it. And people often refer to it mistakenly, but almost accurately, as a Ladybird trust. People call me every day, I want a Ladybird trust. I'm like, well, it's not really a trust. It's just a deed. But because of its probate avoidance function, it actually acts a lot like a trust, which is allowing you to get your stuff to another party and avoid the probate process as part of the deal.
Now, I do have a client who was telling me that her elderly mother did put her property in a Ladybird deed, and it was supposed to be divided amongst the 4 children they were well into their 60s. One of those children was having financial issues. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about some of the disadvantages of the Ladybird deed?
So the disadvantage of any beneficiary designation, whether it's a Ladybird deed or just a POD, TOD on your checking account, is that if your beneficiary dies before you, that share is probably going to end up in probate. If that beneficiary is disabled or receiving public benefits, it's likely to mess up their public benefits. If that individual is in the middle of a divorce, lawsuit, bankruptcy, they could lose half or all of it. If something happens in that person's life, they develop a drug or alcohol addiction, gambling problem, mental illness, where it would be a really bad idea to leave someone with a bad heroin addiction, $50,000 as a direct beneficiary. Those are all things where in hindsight we go, ooh, yes, we avoided probate, but boy, that really wasn't the best result we could have hoped for. When you use the Ladybird deed here in Florida in conjunction with a trust, it allows you to have the best of both worlds. A, probate avoidance. In Florida, we have a very strong constitutional protection for our homestead against most creditors. So if you get in a car accident, you don't pay your credit card company, you get in a bar fight with somebody and they sue you for damages. In Florida, they can't take your house. They can't lien it. They can't foreclose on it. So Florida has a very strong protection. We want to keep that protection. So we like to use the Ladybird deed, which effectively keeps the property in your name. You maintain your ad valorem property tax exemptions, which can be very strong here in Florida. So people that have owned their property for 40, 50 years are paying a fraction of what any other person would have been paying if they just bought that house in property taxes. But the trust, if it's well drafted. Now, a lot of attorneys give you garbage work product and they give you a 15-page trust that basically just says, all to my 3 kids, and if any of them die before me, to their kids. Well, that only covered one of the contingencies. What about disability, incapacity, divorce, lawsuit, bankruptcy, drug problems, mental illness? So a well-drafted trust, my trusts are 80 to 100 pages instead of 15, because it has all of that contingent language. What if this? What if that? And the reason that's important is because you layer on things like dementia, which are happening more and more often, unfortunately, and other memory care disorders. The concern is that, you have all 3 of your kids as beneficiaries and husband passes away, wife gets dementia, she's in her 90s, the kids are in their 70s, and then one of the kids has a stroke and ends up in the nursing home. If mom doesn't have the cognitive ability and capacity to go, ooh, little Johnny's in the nursing home. So I need to call my financial advisor. I need to go see an attorney and do a different Ladybird deed to, remove him so it doesn't become a problem for his public benefits. But mom has dementia, so she can't do that. So now the plan goes south. A well-drafted trust will automatically adjust for all of those life's curveballs without mom and or dad having the cognitive ability to go see the attorney and to call the bank and call the financial advisor and call the life insurance company and do a new Ladybird deed. So I like the flexibility that the trust gives you, but again, it's not for everybody. So the attorney's role should be education first. It's normally trying to figure out how much money they can pinch you for first, and that's not the way I think it should be done. But educate first. There are a lot of people that call me that say, I need a trust. And as I'm getting through their consultation, the lady's got $10,000 in a CD. She's got $700 in the bank, and she owns her little house that's worth, $300,000. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze to pay $5,000 or more to accomplish what could be accomplished for $1,500. I think that money is in that situation is probably better served going down to the family versus getting sucked up in legal expenses to protect what otherwise could have been protected, most likely at a lower price point. Another interesting thing on Ladybird deeds I want to point out, there is something called a traditional life estate deed. And a lot of people use it, even in Florida. And what a life estate deed does, instead of the enhanced life estate deed, which is the Ladybird, a traditional life estate deed says, okay, you're my daughter. I want to avoid probate. So what am I going to do? I'm going to give you my house now and reserve what's called a life estate, or the ability to live in the house for the rest of my life. Okay. So initially it sounds good. You're like, okay, this is good. I'm avoiding probate. The problem is, once I do that, you are the owner, albeit it is a vested remainderman. So you don't own it right now because I still have the life estate. But as soon as I die, that extinguishes and now you own it. The problem is, if you make me mad and you disrespect me and I get to the point where I'm like, you're a terrible daughter and I don't want to leave you anything. If I've done a traditional life estate deed, you have that vested remainder interest. I can't change my mind and give it to somebody else. You would have to deed your remainder interest back to me, which, if we're on bad terms, isn't going to happen. So I like that the Ladybird deed, you can always stack one Ladybird deed on top of the other. So you have 3 children, one of them disappoints you and you want to leave it to the 2. You don't have to get the one that you're disinheriting to play ball with you. You simply lay a new Ladybird deed down and say, you know what? Change my mind. I'm only going 2 ways instead of 3. Similarly, I just had one came in last week where 4 children, parents did a traditional life estate deed, not a Ladybird, and their daughter predeceased them. But mom and dad are still alive. And they don't have a good relationship with daughters to children, with their grandchildren. And so they said, we want to redo our deed and just leave it to our 3 living children. And I said, well, after looking at your deed, you have a traditional life estate deed. So you can't take it away from those grandkids. And even worse, your daughter's share now has to go through her probate to get to her kids, because now you have 3 living beneficiaries and 1 predeceased. That quarter is now stuck until it goes through probate. Your other kids can't sell the house because nobody's going to buy 3/4 of a house. They want to buy all of it. And 1/4 is now stuck in a probate that otherwise didn't need to be done. And when it gets done, that interest is going to your 2 grandchildren who really don't have a good relationship with you that you'd prefer not to leave anything to. So flexibility, I think, is key, and I think is important, because I hate to say it, but things happen in life. And even the closest of families have dynamics. So you, in a perfect world, want to retain that control. If nothing ever crazy happens in your family, great, you let it lie. If something crazy happens, you have the option to regroup and re-beneficiary that real estate without anybody having to agree.
And just to be able to understand and follow the complexity and the decisions that need to be made while building out the estate plan, you can certainly understand why people will pause. And, coming to an estate attorney saying, this is the situation, I'd like to start building out a plan. but the decisions make their head spin, especially when they have to think about all the personalities and family dynamics that are included. And we're just trying to plan for today. What if my child ends up with a partner that down the road I'm not happy with?
Sure.
Then it's a coming back and reiterating, right? These, I want to also encourage people that these estate plans, this is a live document. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard where in hospice, when the social worker comes and says, do you have an estate plan? And their response is, oh yeah, we did a will 20 years ago and haven't looked at it since.
Yeah, things change. People pass away, people get sick. We offer a what's called legacy care program here at my firm, where we meet with those clients every year and we go over their plan. Has anything changed in the law that affects your documents? One of the big changes recently was the Secure Act of January of 2020 fundamentally changed how qualified retirement plans like 401ks, IRAs, 403bs changed how they were taxed when you're leaving them to the next generation. The language that we used to use, if we used the trust as the beneficiary and then to spit out to the ultimate beneficiaries, that language needed to be changed when the Secure Act happened. Well, the general, member of the public doesn't even know that happened. And they certainly don't know, oh, I need to call my lawyer and change the language in my trust, or we're going to have a disadvantaged tax situation because we didn't amend our documents. So we meet with those clients once a year. Have you bought any new property? I get this all the time. Oh, we bought a log cabin in North Carolina as a vacation home or an Airbnb rental. Oh, is that in your trust? No. Well, now you're going to have North Carolina probate when you die because Florida judges in every state only has jurisdiction over property in their state. So if you own real estate outside your state, you could deal with 2, 3, 4 probates if you have stuff all over the country. That could all be coordinated. And then also we ask the questions, how are your kids doing? How is your brother who's going to be the pre-need guardian for your minor child? Oh, he's got cancer. Maybe we start thinking about a contingent in case things don't go well for him. But I analogize the estate plan to a financial plan. If you go see a financial advisor when you have, 2 toddlers, you say, hey, this is how much money we have. This is what we think our retirement looks like. And they buy you stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all this other fun stuff. And then you don't touch it for 20 years. How good are those stocks and bonds? Well, they might be good, but chances are the market's changed. And chances are your legal plan, if you draft a will and you don't touch it for 20 years, it might still be okay, but there's a good possibility, especially if you do these when your kids are really young, which is when you should be doing them. Things change. The kids grow up. Sometimes they go a different path in life, or they are married to that person who isn't your favorite. And you want to make sure that your inheritance can benefit your child, but maybe not their spouse.
Right.
Those are all things that we should be thinking about.
And a lot to be thinking about. So can we just break it down as some takeaways as we close out this conversation?
Sure.
What are 2 or 3 things people can, again, it's complicated, but to take those baby steps, what can they do today to start planning for tomorrow?
Number 1, get educated. So I say education first and education early. Believe it or not, when you turn 18 or your children or grandchildren turn 18, you don't think about this, but the moment your child turns 18, you are still biological mama bear. You are no longer legal mama bear. And God forbid they get in that car accident and they get rushed to the emergency room. The HIPAA laws do have some exemptions for life and death situations. But once they're out of that life and death situation, their doctors are not going to talk to you and give you information, because if they do, they're going to get sued and get fined by the federal government for violating HIPAA. There's no HIPAA release, or there's no HIPAA exemption even for spouses or for your adult parent. So you want documents that provide flexibility and control, even over basic things like legal, medical, financial decisions. The minute you're 18, because you don't have that biological and legal guardian that has always been there for your life up to this point. And as a parent, you send your kids off to college, and I always say, there's this hold my beer, watch this moment, and then they end up in the emergency room for doing something stupid. The parents rush to the emergency room, and they're going to get some pushback somewhere around the edges. It may not be when you want to get pushback. So estate planning starts at 18. No one does it No one wants to do it. My clients do it, but no one thinks about it. And get educated early and start a plan. You don't have to take the shotgun approach to estate planning and spend $10,000 day one on your estate plan. Maybe we just start with power of attorney, healthcare, surrogate, living will, legal, medical, financial, and pull my plug, don't pull my plug. That's a really good start for anyone at any age. If you don't have kids yet, name your parents or your girlfriend or boyfriend or your siblings as your beneficiaries. Call it a day. As life evolves and gets more complex, your plan should also get more complex.
And continuing to iterate your plan, as we talked about. Well, listen, Michelangelo, thank you so much for your expertise and sharing your educational experience and hopefully empowering people. Yes, it's complicated, but step by step, with the right professional advice, you can get through this aspect of your life. And with that, we'll end here. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.